Hey guys, Blue Galaxy part number 2. I thought about a few things after I made my first video. My first video is mostly focused on the logic of deleting Blue Galaxy and how to make it profitable, and just the mechanics of going through that process. But after posting that video, I thought of a few things that I wanted to add. And let's take a step back and think about the motivation to delete Blue Galaxy. I presented two different scenarios where deleting Blue Galaxy and recycling it would be beneficial and profitable. I presented two scenarios for that, but I thought of two more that don't really apply to me, so I didn't include it in my video. But it might apply to some people, and in a kind of accidental way, it's actually still beneficial to me. It wasn't my intention with rebuilding Blue Galaxy, but in a incidental way, it is still beneficial. So I think it's worth noting some of these things. So let's take a step back and think about the primary motivation to delete Blue Galaxy in the first place. Reason number one is going to be fragments. That's my motivation to delete it, and I think it's really the only reason to delete it, honestly, and not in. I'm going to talk about these other three in this video. That's the purpose of this video. I'm going to talk on those three. Fragments is only the real reason to justify deleting it. Simply because of the time that it takes, the time that you have to invest into making this process work. You will make a profit on these other three categories if that's what you're after. But considering the time invested into the project, I don't know that it's justified. In terms of fragments, though, it absolutely is going to be justified and worth the time invested. I'll circle back to the fragments thing. Forge points. There's absolutely no way to lose forge points on a Blue Galaxy rebuild, and I'm going to break that down for you guys as well. But if you are after forge points, it's literally impossible to lose forge points in this process. Goods is, so these first two I touched on in my first video. Goods I did not talk about in my first video, but goods is actually a relevant reason to delete and recycle Blue Galaxy. The first time around when I deleted Blue Galaxy, I wasn't doing it specifically for goods. I was after fragments, but I timed it so I transitioned from Jupiter into Titan, and I deleted my Blue Galaxy like 2 days after joining Titan era. And mostly I was after fragments, but I was also able to accumulate a ton of Titan goods in the first 3 or 4 days, where moved to Titan, one up kit, whatever buildings I'm after that I know that I'm going to be hitting with Blue Galaxy, and run Blue Galaxy 100 levels and accumulate goods for the next era in the process. So that's a potential reason to do that. I wouldn't do that, like Space Hub and Titan have been established for a while now, so those goods are pretty readily available. So I wouldn't necessarily do that just because you age up as an individual player, but when the server releases a new era, that's potentially a good opportunity to move up to the new era, delete your Blue Galaxy, and accumulate a ton of goods for whatever era comes out next. Not something I mentioned in my first video. It is worth noting though, and you will definitely make a profit on it. Like, all of these have a check mark on it. You will make a profit. Whatever you're after, you will make a profit doing it. It's just a question of whether or not it's worth the time that you invest into the process. And in terms of goods, troops, and forge points, there's a lot of other ways to generate those things in the game. You can get those from GBG, QI, guild expeditions, just doing your events. There's chateau, recurring quests. There's a lot of different ways to get those resources from other parts of the game besides deleting Blue Galaxy. But that said, you will make a profit on all three of these things if you decide to delete Blue Galaxy. So goods wasn't my motivation the first time around, but it actually, I timed it with my move into Titan, when Titan first came out, I timed it according to that move and generated a ton of Titan goods on the first couple days that it opened. So that was beneficial to me. Troops would be the number 4. I can't get rid of this pop-up in the background because I'm in screenwriting mode. Troops would be the number 4 motivation here, and again, there's a lot of buildings that give troops these days. They're pretty easy to get from GBG or events, but for players that do have an Alcatraz and are considering deleting it but feel uncertain about the running out of troops for GBG or whatever, if there is some hesitation there, deleting Blue Galaxy would actually be a pretty good failsafe for that. And I'll talk about that one first, actually, because that one's pretty short and sweet. Alcatraz, level 0 to 60, let's say you delete it, and then run into a jam and you really need troops, so you're like, oh man, I gotta replant my Alcatraz. Level 0 to 60 costs 1,800 forge points. Or 18,000, sorry. It's not that cheap. It's pretty cheap, but it's not that cheap. 18,000 forge points for Traz level 0 through 60. We're going to go with an average of 30 troops per level, plus or minus 5 throughout the process, I guess. Traz is pretty consistent at that troop per level ratio. So that would be a total of 60 levels times 30 troops is 1,800 troops that you'd generate by deleting Traz and rebuilding it to level 60. You would generate 1,800 troops. The downside with that process is that the 18,000 that it would cost you is not supplemented by anything in the process. It would just be delete and rebuild with the barracks in the background. The alternative here would be deleting and rebuilding Blue Galaxy if troops was your priority, just hypothetically. Blue Galaxy level 0 through 60 is 25,000 forge points to level, averaging 10 hits per level. Some of them are lower on the earlier levels, like 7 charges per level, and then on the higher levels you're getting 13 and 14 charges per level. So we're gonna call it an average of 10 charges per level, which gives us a grand total of 600 charges for the process. Okay, there's a lot of buildings nowadays that are giving at least 10 troops per hit. And in some cases, like some of the GBG minor buildings that are been produced recently, that's actually closer to like 20 or 25 troops per building collection. So by deleting Blue Galaxy, we now have 600 charges to apply to buildings that are giving at a minimum 10 troops, and I'm going to give you guys some examples of this, but potentially up to 25 troops. So we have 600 charges throughout the life of Blue Galaxy applied to buildings that are giving 10 troops at a time is at a minimum 6,000 troops, assuming that Blue Galaxy doesn't double any single collection, and assuming a moderate Blue Galaxy success rate, like maybe 50%, we would actually be at 9,000 troops generated throughout the process. Versus the 1,800 that we're generating by rebuilding Traz, we're now generating 9,000 by deleting Blue Galaxy. The difference between the two scenarios, though, is that by deleting Blue Galaxy and using those charges to collect troop producers, we're potentially collecting goods and forge points in the process off of some of these buildings, whereas the Traz deletion does not provide any of those things. I'm going to finish my thought here, and then I'll jump into edit mode and show you some examples of buildings that you would hit in that scenario. like I said at the beginning, I personally would not delete Blue Galaxy for the purpose of increasing my goods or my troops stockpile. That wouldn't be my personal motivation, but it is worth noting for this video as kind of an afterthought to my first video. It is worth noting because it might be relevant to some players. I'm not hurting on either of those categories, so it's not my motivation. But is worth noting because regardless of your motivation with Blue Galaxy and how to manipulate it, I guess is the word. Blue Galaxy can definitely be manipulated to accomplish certain goals. So depending on how your goals are set up, deleting Blue Galaxy is actually a better way of generating troops than planning and building a Traz. Fun fact. Okay, let's get into edit mode real quick. Let's start with the troop idea. I've pulled out a few buildings for each general idea. Let's start with the troop concept here. Glimdrake Riders is a GBG reward building that gives 25 forge points, 147 goods. So pretty healthy on the goods, kind of mediocre on the forge points, but still 25 forge points on a Blue Galaxy collection with a disposable Blue Galaxy. Remember, the purpose of recycling Blue Galaxy is that instead of being emotionally attached to the value of charges off of a Blue Galaxy level 130, we have the benefit of running multiple levels a day at 200 forge points owner cost to complete the level. So these levels are extremely easy to complete, and now we have the benefit of running through 6 or 7 a day. And the percentage of success is lower on that. But the trade-off here is that if you run 7 levels of Blue Galaxy from 50 to 60, the owner cost is like 1,200 forge points. You get, I think it's 84 Blue Galaxy charges at 60% success rate. And keep in mind, the success rate of Blue Galaxy 180 is only 75%. So the 60% success rate on level 50 is actually really not that terrible. So the idea here is that we're using disposable Blue Galaxy levels to accumulate fragments or resources that we wouldn't normally target with Blue Galaxy, just because we can run through so many levels of those a day. So Glimdrake Riders, 147 goods, plus some to the guild, a few forge points, which helps with the level cost, but also 20 troops, right? So I have 3 of these in my city, there's 60 troops automatically. Traz level 60 gives 60 just by completing it. So if I hit all 3 of these buildings with a deleted Blue Galaxy, I'm getting the same amount that I would get just from collecting Traz once, but they're potentially doubled in the process, and I still have 7 more charges to use off my Blue Galaxy to hit other buildings like Lindworm. There's some cultural buildings that give troop benefit, things like that. So at a minimum, like worst case scenario, assuming you level Blue Galaxy 0 to 60 and just hit every single troop producer that you have at a minimum, you'll still quadruple what you would generate from running Traz up to 60, but you'll also be generating the forge points to cover the cost of those levels in the process. Absolute worst case scenario, and I think if that does happen to you, you should probably submit a ticket to Inno support, because if you go from Blue Galaxy level 0 to 60 and don't get a single double, there's probably something wrong with the algorithm. So realistically, you're going to accumulate more than that. Troop production really wouldn't be my personal motivation to delete Blue Galaxy, but like I said, for players who do have an Alcatraz that are worried about running out of troops if they do delete it, keep this in the back of your mind that you can, they're worried about deleting Traz. I might run out of troops. I also want to accomplish XYZ goal. I want to generate more forge points. I want to print fragments of some specific building, right? So keep this in the back of your mind, okay? Delete Traz permanently. Delete Blue Galaxy. Go for the fragments that you're after, and keep it in the back of the mind that as you're going through these Blue Galaxy levels, you can also be hitting buildings like Glimdrake Riders to supplement the troop the troop shortage that you're anticipating from deleting Traz. Does that make sense so far? Next up on the list was goods. Mamajidori Shrine is a really good example of that. On the Forge Point side, it's 51 Forge Points for Space Hub minimum. There's a possibility that it gives either 20 Forge Points to inventory or 400 Forge Points to inventory. So there's a possibility that Mamajidori Shrine actually produces a ton of Forge Points, possibly. It's a 10% chance that it generates that many Forge Points. But regardless of the Forge Point production on Mamajidori, it's actually pretty excellent for goods production. Mamajidori gives a minimum, it's actually either or. It's a minimum of 256 goods or 636. And it's either or, so there's nothing in between. You get one or the other. Either quantity is actually pretty healthy, and if that doubles off of a Blue Galaxy, that's potentially almost 1,300 goods that you would be getting off a single building. If this was included in your roster of Blue Galaxy targets during recycle. So if you are after goods, Mamajidori would be an excellent candidate. Possibility of giving a ton of Forge Points as well, like I said, but let's assume worst case scenario that you only get 71 Forge Points off of it, which is the minimum that you would be able to get. That's not super impressive on the Forge Point side, but on the good side, pretty excellent candidate. Let's take a half step back and circle back to what I would... These are actually not Blue Galaxy candidates for me, any of them, not even the Eternal Market is not a Blue Galaxy candidate for me currently, but I would consider these to be kind of like a commonly accepted Blue Galaxy candidate. So let's take a small step back here and look at the benefit on these buildings, how we can incorporate this into the rebuild strategy. All three of these buildings generate a ton of Forge Points and goods per collection, and they're Eternal Market is definitely one of the most efficient in the game. The three of these, though, just collectively are not necessarily the most efficient on any single category, but for a single collection, there's a ton of big numbers coming out of these buildings, right? So on the Orchard, we have 125 Forge Points, 140 goods. Eternal Market is, I think it's about 320 Forge Points, 420 goods. Definitely one of the most efficient in the game, but that's not always true of Blue Galaxy candidates. Sometimes it's just the sheer quantity that you're after, not necessarily the efficiency per tile. Where a Blood Lily might be more efficient on guild goods, but it's a 1x1 and it's only so many goods per individual collection, so you wouldn't waste a Blue Galaxy charge on that. So it's not necessarily efficiency per tile that we're after with Blue Galaxy collection, it's just the sheer quantity, and all three of these are pretty good candidates. The Moose Mountain is at 130 of each. So pretty solid candidates for Forge Points and goods. Goods. Pretty good candidates for Blue Galaxy in terms of Forge Points and goods, right? The downside with all three of those is that there's no fragments and there's no troops, which is the reason why I don't collect any of them with my Blue Galaxy currently. That is the downside. But if you are after Forge Points or goods in your Blue Galaxy cycle, keep in mind that you have not just these are kind of obvious, but you have other buildings in your city that will meet that criteria without burning up FSP kits to hit your Eternal Market multiple times per day with Blue Galaxy charges. You can actually hit several other different buildings and just continue leveling your Blue Galaxy in the process. Does that make sense so far? Let's scroll down a tier here. So up here we have just top producers, right? This middle category is kind of multi-purpose. So on this left side, actually here, let me get that out of the way, just so you guys, there you go. Top producers, man, struggle is real. Top producers. Middle category is kind of a happy medium. We already talked about goods and troops off of this right side. On this left side would represent forge point producers. So Yukimoto Tower and the Celtic Goldsmith. Both of these are awesome on forge point production. No goods off of either of them, but really impressive per tile on forge points. So we're getting 109 off of the Yuki, and then a minimum, I think 121 is the minimum on the Goldsmith, but as much as 236 forge points. So super efficient on forge points. If this doubles, you're close to 500 forge points off a single collection. Both of them are awesome for forge points, no goods. But they both produce minor buildings with a similar pattern. They both produce minor buildings that give troops and forge points, which is the blueberry from the Celtic Goldsmith, or a minor building that gives goods and no forge points, no troops, which is the 3x3 minor building from the Celtic Goldsmith, which I don't have planted, so I can't imitate it in my city. So the moral of the story, both of these are awesome candidates if you are after forge points. Both of these are awesome candidates for generating forge points, and they both produce buildings that generate more forge points passively to be collected by your city, as well as troops. So there's a little bit of overlap here, right? And it goes both ways, because if we're hitting Glimdrake for the purpose of the 20 troops, there's some overlap in the forge point production. Makes sense so far? Eco is really a pretty excellent balance, and I think it was overpowered. I'm glad that NL hasn't nerfed it. They've nerfed other buildings in the past that after they released it, it was obvious that it was too overpowered, so I am relieved that they haven't nerfed Eco yet. I think it's getting kind of out of control, but for the here and the now, Eco is actually a pretty solid balance. Giving forge points and goods and troops immediately from the building, and then the ability to print 2 minor buildings that give either forge points or goods off of the minor buildings. So Eco kind of checks all 4 boxes there. It's giving fragments for buildings that, so it's giving fragments first of all. That's one of the reasons to delete Blue Galaxy's fragment production. So Eco is generating fragments. The fragments that it's generating also check 2 of the boxes, which is forge points and goods, are possible reasons to delete Blue Galaxy. And the 4th category would be troops, which, like I said, I'm not really after particularly, but if I'm generating them in the process of this, it doesn't hurt my feelings, you know? Within this middle group, there's definitely some overlap where we're getting ton of forge points, some rogues off the Yuki, which I'm going to make a little side note on in a second here. But primarily forge points is what we're hitting there. We're hitting primarily troops over here. The benefit of Yuki and Goldsmith is that they're producing minor buildings that give either goods or troops, depending on your city needs, so that's a benefit there. There's a lot of overlap in that middle category, right? The 4th category, which was number 1 on the beginning of the video, the 4th category is fragments. And when I say fragments, I mean like purely fragments. There's a lot of buildings that give fragments for something that don't make my list. So when I say fragments, I mean just raw fragments at the expense of everything else. And that's going to be this bottom group down here. My goal is ecos, as I've mentioned, so I'm hitting my hover green. This is giving 75 forge points and 75 goods, which is not terrible in the grand scheme of things, and it's definitely better than the Shrine of Knowledge days, you know what I mean? But compared to an Eternal Market, this is a pretty low output, you know? The goal for me, though, is to generate ecos, and I actually do not hit my eternal market with Blue Galaxy. They I only have so many charges, I only have so many FSP kits, so my motivation is to hit this subpar building. Included in my Blue Galaxy cycle are buildings like Yardasil, Shinto, Escutcheons. This is 4 FSP, this is 6 FSP, this is 10 FSP fragments, and the production output on all these is absolutely pathetic. So that's what I mean by purely focused on fragments. FSP is the fragment that I need in order to hit hover more often and across multiple Blue Galaxy levels. So I am going for a specific fragment and a specific building fragment at the expense of forge points, goods, troops, anything like that. And that's kind of the big picture here. You can go for fragments, you can go for forge points, you can go for goods, you can go for troops. Whatever your motivation is to rebuild Blue Galaxy, you will be profitable in doing that. But there is a trade-off, and the main trade-off is just the time that it's going to take to go through this process. The secondary trade-off is the thing that you care about least. So in my case, it's troops. The second least valuable thing to me would be goods. I have a ton of goods, so as long as I generated enough forge points in this process just to cover the cost of Blue Galaxy level, I don't really need more than that. So goods is the most disposable. I care slightly more about forge points because I don't want to lose forge points in this process. So as long as I cover the Blue Galaxy level, like I said, I'm happy. My primary motivation is fragments, and specific fragments at the expense of everything else. If you want to go for forge points, then deleting Blue Galaxy is actually potentially very profitable and a lot less restrictive, just because there are so many buildings in the game now that are generating more than 100 forge points per collection. Whereas my Blue Galaxy collection cycle is pretty restrictive, all things considered, right? But if you're after goods or forge points, it's pretty easy to delete Blue Galaxy and at least double, no pun intended, but at least double your cost in the process. Final thought in this video is going to be timing. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to write some notes for you guys. Let's talk about timing though, and let's consider all 4 motivations and what the correct timing and pace would be for those scenarios. Let's start with troops first. That's the easiest one, so we'll get that out of the way. So timing. If you're after troops, I've got a little grid here that we're going to use for the other 3 categories as well. When to do it is category number 1. Before you delete Blue Galaxy, what you should be hitting with Blue Galaxy and what you should be preparing for during part 1, part 2, and part 3. That's the early phases of Blue Galaxy rebuild. During part 1, during part 2 is middle phase, during part 3 is end phase of Blue Galaxy rebuild. End is when you reach a Blue Galaxy level that you're happy with, that you don't really have the forge points or the desire to continue leveling past that, and now we're just back in the normal routine of 15 charges per day. So that would be the end metric there. So when to delete Traz if you're after troops? Anytime, really. If you are lower era, time it according to BG or to GBG, so that when you jump up, the troops that you are producing are from 2 eras ahead of what you're actually fighting in GBG, would be my recommendation. Before you delete Blue Galaxy, focus your Blue Galaxy charges on parent buildings that give minor buildings that give troops. This would be like Yuki, Celtic Goldsmith. Both of these are giving troops, right? Focus your Blue Galaxy charges on that. It may not be the most forge points or the most goods, out of your city that you can possibly generate. But if you focus on those parent buildings before you start the Blue Galaxy process, you can probably actually print enough of those minor buildings to kind of abbreviate the Blue Galaxy cycle. If you have enough of those planted in your city, just generating passive troops, you may not need to get so aggressive about hitting them with Blue Galaxy. During the process, on the early side, I would definitely focus on the parent buildings as well as FP producers, because a lot of these minor buildings like the blueberry and the sled pup, they're super efficient per tile on forge points, but per collection 15 forge points is not going to cover the cost of your Blue Galaxy level. So on the early part of the Blue Galaxy cycle, I would recommend continuing to hit Yuki, Celtic Goatsmiths, things like that, but also loop in things like Arctic Orangery just to supplement the FP need. During Blue Galaxy, like middle of the project, during the sweet spot, I would say go full bore on the minor buildings that are giving the troops that you're actually after. If this is a Traz deletion project, you know what I mean? Just go full bore on the troops that you're actually after, because the level cost during that sweet spot is like 100 forge points per level. So the 10 sled pups that you hit are more than gonna cover that. Towards the tail end, go back to the forge point and parent strategy, and at the end of Blue Galaxy, I would focus on using your Blue Galaxy charges to either print more attack buildings or to target forge point producers and level up great buildings that do give attack. Part of the troop crisis is insufficient attack percentage, so it's not necessarily that you need more troops, you just need them to be stronger. So hopefully during this process, if you're after troops, you've printed enough to sustain, but then towards the tail end of it, focus on your attack ability so that the fewer troops that you have don't die as easily. Goods. When to do it. Ideally with an era change. If you're in Space Hub, I would, and goods is your priority, I would recommend waiting for this this trigger until a new era comes out above Space Hub. That would be my recommendation. Any era below Space Hub, you could do it anytime you wanted, but I would honestly wait to transition into a new era. Let's say you're after goods. Era, ideally, if you're lower era, before you delete Blue Galaxy, use your Blue Galaxy charges leading up to it, like the week before. Use your Blue Galaxy charges to target buildings that generate population, minor buildings. So Knight's Pavilion is a good one. Raccoon Hideout, I don't think you can produce that, but there's a few minor buildings out there that are 2x2 or smaller that give a ton of population per tile. Try to target those with your Blue Galaxy charges before you delete Blue Galaxy for the purpose of generating goods. Some of the most efficient goods producers in the game are also extremely population negative. So depending on your population balance, something to keep in mind. In the early phase of rebuilding Blue Galaxy, if you're targeting goods, target buildings that generate fragments for finished special, as well as finished single goods buildings. This is relevant for players that are transitioning from Virtual Future into Space eras, where you now have synthesizers, and the ability to finish those goods and complete colonies is going to be a huge advantage. In lower eras, so like I have a hover city in Arvahal, Indie Age, and in lower cities, the FSG is primarily for rival tasks, but it also helps me supplement goods to my guild, where they're potentially hurting on EMA or HMA eras that I had depleted as a newbie. You know what I mean? So if my guild is like, hey, we need whatever, we need jewelry, we need some LNA goods, I have the ability to plan a goods building and contribute to my guild that way, where I don't really have a way to to donate previous era goods from my city itself, from the passive collection. So if you are after goods, focus on FSP, obviously just for the benefit of repeatedly hitting buildings like Orange Streams or whatever, but also focus on the finished single goods producers. There's a few of them out there. Clove, there's brain fart. There's a few buildings out there that give at least a full kit of, or almost a full kit of finished single goods every day. So focus on those things. During the project mid-cycle, focus on your specific targets. Momajidori would be a good one for goods. At the tail end of the goods cycle, though, this is where we differ from the troops. Towards the tail end, I would actually kind of stop aggressively leveling Blue Galaxy around Blue Galaxy level 60 and just continue to pace yourself all the way up to however high you want to go, but just a couple levels a day and pace yourself with your top producing goods buildings. That's kind of the difference from the troop strategy, where the troop strategy you can blast through it pretty quick, because you're just harvesting fragments and it doesn't really necessarily matter where they come from. On the goods side, though, you do want to be a little bit more specific, hitting your top producers more consistently every day. So if you get below a threshold where the minimum building that I'm going to hit with Blue Galaxy gives 200 goods, if you get below that threshold, don't run another Blue Galaxy cycle that day and kind of pace yourself into the end game. This is kind of true for Forge Points. When to do it doesn't really matter, but I would time it for a great building project. So like if you have a arc level 120 and you really want to push it to 180, I would time Blue Galaxy deletion according to that. So you could do it anytime you wanted and you'll still make a profit on the Forge Point side, but if you do want to time it according to something, it would be timed with great building. Similar to goods here, think about population before you initiate that project. Some of the top FP producers, like the Blueberry and the Sled Pup, also top producers for troops. Extremely brutal on population though. But this is a 2x3 minor building that can be printed and generates 21 Forge Points on a 2x3. So if you're after Forge Points, that's probably something that you want planted in your city, and the ability to harvest just passively. I'm not saying hit that with your Blue Galaxy charges, but if you are after FSP, you want to be able to passively collect this as you go through your city. So think about population before you start. Similar to the transition from troops into goods, where we start pacing ourselves towards the end levels of Blue Galaxy, start pacing yourself a little bit sooner on Blue Galaxy if you're after Forge Points. So I would consider population and FSP kits, target those early on in your Blue Galaxy remodel. So probably stop aggressively leveling Blue Galaxy around probably level 20 and pace yourself from there. And that's, so this pace metric is a little bit farther back on the FP goal, where we're actually slowing down Blue Galaxy starting at level 20 and taking our sweet time to get back up to 100. And that's very specific, targeting Eternal Market, Orange Dreams, and anything that's getting 100, 120 Forge Points. And depending on how many of those you have in your city, you're going to be limited on your Blue Galaxy levels, and set some landmarks for yourself where if it's below 90 Forge Points, I'm not going to hit it, because it's not going to accomplish my goal of leveling my Centaurus to 100 by XYZ date. Does that make sense? Last category is fragments, which is my motivation. Screen is annoying sometimes. Alright. Last but not least, fragments, when to time it. Again, anytime, but if you are going to be intentional about timing it, I would time it after an event that you really liked, that either you did really well in, you got a ton of parts and you want more, or is an event that you really wanted to place well in, but you only got like bronze league or whatever, so you're trying to make up some lost ground on that event. That's definitely true for me with my eco project. It's a building that I want more of. I didn't get a lot of them, so I'm trying to make up lost ground. But the timing is relevant to an event. Before deleting Blue Galaxy, if you're after frags, think about forge points. So with troops, we're thinking about parent buildings. We're looking at population on goods and forge points. But if your primary motivation is for fragments, consider using your last few Blue Galaxy levels before you delete it to stockpile as many forge points as you can, because there's a really good possibility that the forge points you generate throughout this process are not going to pay for itself. So try to do yourself a favor and stockpile that ahead of time. On the early phases, we're looking at finished single special and forge point production. And there's some similarities with all four of these, but the timing is a little bit different on all of them. Whereas for forge points, we're only looking for FSP kits. But if we're after fragments, we want FSP kits. Obviously, I want the ability to hit this repeatedly, but I also need FP, knowing that the building that I'm targeting is not going to cover the cost of Blue Galaxy level. So there's a variable there. On the finished goods side, we have FSG, right? And then on the troop side, we don't really care about the FSP because there's enough buildings that produce troops that we don't need to finish special any single one of them. We just need to hit the parent building. So there's some variables in all of these where the timing and what you're targeting is a little bit different each time. In terms of pace, towards the middle of Blue Galaxy rebuild on the fragment project, target what you're after specifically, which is hover green for me, but it could be Yuki Towers or Crimson Dragon ships or whatever building that you're after specifically. Target that. But the pace yourself thing stops a lot sooner on the fragment side. So I would actually stop aggressively. This is pretty aggressive, and I would stop aggressively farming that about level 80 or so, and just focus on FSP kits only towards the end of Blue Galaxy, which is kind of what I'm doing this project. I've printed 3 ecos since I deleted it. My Blue Galaxy is at level 95 right now. I'm continuing to hit hover with Blue Galaxy charges, but I'm not really using a whole lot of FSP kits on it currently. My last few levels of Blue Galaxy are mostly just to generate more FSP kits, burn up the last few levels on hover, and then delete Blue Galaxy again with a surplus of FSP kits in order to repeat this process a little bit faster the next time. So hopefully this is helpful in terms of timing and things that you need to think about depending on your personal goals. I'll leave this up for a second, I guess. I was about to clear it. I'll leave it up for a second. But like I said at the beginning of the video, there's really no way to lose resources on recycling Blue Galaxy, regardless of what you're after. Even if you're after troops, like targeting troop buildings does not give forge points, you know what I mean? But the cost of Blue Galaxy from 0 to 60 is 25,000 forge points. My city generates 12,000 forge points per day. So I could theoretically level my Blue Galaxy 0 to 30 and then 30 to 60 in 2 days and break even on forge point cost. And that's assuming that I'm hitting 1x1s for 3 forge points. You know what I mean? And I would still break even on the forge point cost of that. But depending on how many buildings in my city I have that produce troops in the process, I would quadruple my troop production over paying for a Traz that does not generate forge points in the process. So regardless of your priority, if it's troops or goods or forge points or frags, there's absolutely no way to lose resources by rebuilding your blue galaxy. The main question is just how do you time it, and what do you target before you do it, what do you target during it, and how do you sustain that process after you're done. So if you are after troops, for example, on that note, how do you sustain that process now that you've deleted it? Focus on your attack ability. You've generated enough troops to stockpile to have a comfortable amount in your inventory, but now you need to focus on your attack ability to sustain that, right? If I'm after fragments, well, I just burned up 5 million of them hitting one specific building repeatedly. So in order to sustain that, I need to generate more FSP, right? If we're hitting FP, in order to sustain that, we just pace ourselves to where the cost of the level doesn't exceed the buildings that we're hitting every day. Does that make sense? Hope this was helpful. I got some positive feedback off the version number 1, so hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.